Hello, welcome back. Today I'm very excited to be talking to you about something, and that is Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Clay McLeod Chapman. I'm going to get into my summary, and then I'll tell you how I feel about this book so far. Okay, we open, and he talks about his parents, and he talks about how his parents feel about his family. He is married to a woman named Alicia, I believe, and she is half Haitian. No, she's full Haitian, and their daughter is half Haitian. And the mother is not a fan of that, and she constantly brings up this like idea of I don't understand why they have to come to our country if they can just go back to ours. Just there's gonna be a lot of me stating stuff, so just get used to that now. Mind you, no one's illegal on stolen land. But so there's a lot of statements in this book, and I think this book is very well written. So we continue, and we get a lot of conversation. This book is dense, so we got a lot of ground to cover, and we're gonna cover it fast. So just know when I'm saying this, you're not getting everything in here because I'm only 120 pages in, and there is a lot to get through. So we start here, right? And after this, we quickly switch to a day. So they live in Brooklyn. They have a daughter. The daughter, she's a singer. I don't know. I can't remember the name off the top, her name off the top of my head. I'll put it on the screen here. But she's a singer. She loves the place that they live in, and I love the concept in this book that it brings up how even in liberal communities, you're not necessarily safe. So what happens is he gets this ominous voicemail from his mother, and she's basically like, "Hey son, it's time to wake up and open your eyes," which is so horrifying, absolutely terrifying. Clay McLeod Chapman, the way you ate with that was terrifying. So he's like, what the hell? And so he goes and is like, he calls his other brother, whose name is Asher, and he's like, "Hey, I need you to go check on mom and dad. Like, they're being weird." And he's like, "Okay." And so he lives 7 hours away, which I presume his parents live in the South, but I'm not 100% sure because if they live in Brooklyn, I'm assuming they live in the South. And his brother's only an hour away. And we get a whole conversation about how his brother's the favorite. He's always been the favorite. He will always be the favorite because he's very, very, like, he falls into their standards. And we'll get there. So basically, his brother is like talking. His brother talks to him. And he's like, "I'll go check on them. Fine." And he calls his brother again. And he's like, are our parents like good?" And he calls his parents a bunch of times, and he eventually just has to go down there. So he drives 7 hours and goes down to see his parents. And he discovers that they are indeed not good. He pulls up and he sees that the freaking grass is all overgrown. His parents' pots are died, which he knows that they would never let happen. So he's expecting them to be dead. And he opens the door, and everything's like moved around. All the mirrors and photos are smashed down, and he's looking around, and all that's playing is Fax News, which is obviously a parallel to Fox News. I'm just gonna call it Fox News because I'm gonna call it what it is. Fox News. So all that's playing is Fox News, and he is walking around their house and he really can't find anything. He notices the smell first. It is absolutely disgusting in their house. And he's like just walking around, and he walks in the living room and he turns around and his dad is standing there. And he's like, what the hell are you doing here?" And his dad doesn't say anything to him. He sits him down on the couch and he sits him in front of the TV and he turns off the TV. And he turns around, the TV's turned back on. Mind you, this is probably the scariest part of this book so far. This book is horrifying. Oh my god, it is some of the best horror I've read in a while. It is absolutely terrifying, has you shaking at every step. So he turns around, his dad's like there, and he's like, "Okay, sit down." So his dad's sitting in his recliner, and this recliner is like his baby. Like, he loves this recliner. And so he sits him down, he turns off the TV, it comes back on, he's like, "Okay, what the hell?" And he walks outside to talk to his wife, who's like, "I can come down there," and then his phone cuts out and he can't call anyone. And his wife's not coming, and no one's coming to save him, and he can't even call 911 or nothing. So then he goes to find his mom. And he turned off all the TVs in the house when he was in there, and now they're all back on. So now he's just trying to like figure out what the hell is going on. And I love the way it's described here. They say he crawled deeper into the bowels of the house. Love that. And so he's crawling deeper into the bowels of the house, and basically he finds his mom in a room just sitting in front of the TV, just staring at it, eyes open, nothing. And there's a lot of stuff that happens in this book that I am leaving out. Know that this book is not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of stuff that happens in here that is very intense, and a lot of disgusting stuff happens in here. I'm leaving a lot out for the purposes of not wanting to repeat it all. But a bunch of stuff happens with his mom, and she essentially will not leave this TV. She is locked in front of this TV. It describes as bathing in the light of the TV, which I love. She is locked on this TV, and they have this political commentator in front of the TV, who I'm sure is supposed to represent someone. I assume either Charlie Kirk or like Ben Shapiro. I'm not 100% sure though, but it's supposed to represent some sort of political commentator. And they're in love with him. They're just staring at there 24/7. That's all they'll do. So he takes his parents, he moves his mom away from the TV, he turns off all the TVs again, and he sits his parents down. This part is absolutely horrifying when you read it. And I encourage you to read this book. This book is phenomenally good so far. I don't know, I'm only 130 pages in. But so far it's great. So he sits them down in front of the TV, in the living room, in the kitchen, and he's like, he needs to get them to eat something. So they're sitting there. He starts cleaning up the house. He airs out the house. He opens all the windows, and they're still staring at the TV. Even the TV's off. They're just staring at the black part of the TV. Nothing, like they're just looking. And I absolutely love that. And so all of a sudden the TV starts turning back on, and he's like, what the hell? And then the political commentator starts speaking to him, and he's like, are we ready to wake up and open our eyes? And then he starts counting 10, 9, 8, 7. And this part of the book, oh, it's so good. He's like feeding his mom, and she's like keeps doing it. And right as they go down to 1, she smiles and bites down, and then spits it out. And then he backs up, and the TV is wailing, like it keeps turning on and on and on, and it won't go off. So he unplugs it, and then the whole place goes dark. Are you kidding me? Phenomenal way of building tension. Absolutely 10 out of 10. Great. I was on the edge of my seat. Absolutely amazing. And then he can't see anything. And he hears his dad next to him whispering in his ear. Might I say, amazing again. This book is absolutely phenomenal. And then he slips and he hits the ground, and his mom is standing over him smiling at him, and she starts running at him, starts attacking him. She bites his ear off, and then he pushes her into a closet, and she starts banging her head against the closet. Then his dad comes up from behind and throws him on the ground, and he starts freaking like attacking him, and he shoves this remote in his dad's face, and his dad starts choking. And then his mom is banging her head against the wall. So he kicks the remote into his dad's face further, killing his dad. And then his mom's freaking face comes out of the door, and she's like basically dead. Like there's a hole in the door now because she's been banging her head into it, and she falls over. And then he turns on CNN and starts cleaning the house. But then he tries to call 911 and discovers, girl, this is happening everywhere. This is a worldwide problem. This book is great at creating an atmosphere for a worldwide issue. That is very difficult to do, and I've seen it done awfully so many times. This is good at it. So he goes on the TV, and he sees a school shooting, another school shooting after another, which is such a great allegory to the way that it actually is in America, that it's just one after another, because that really is how it feels. And he looks, and his brother is one of the school shooters at his nephew's school. Oh, how amazing. End of chapter, mic drop, next part. Great. And we switch to his brother's perspective, which is the family on the front of the cover. We get introduced to Asher. He talks about how he's politically liberal but physically conservative, which if you know anything about politics, you know that is such a bullshit, like a weird thing to say. Like, you can't be both, you gotta pick one, you know? But he talks about he's never true, like, he's like basically his parents' favorite, and they love him the most, and he has a family. So I'm gonna go through each member of the family and then kind of intersect it, because I need to, like, we're gonna start with the son. The son's name is Caleb. He's 16 years old. He's going through a lot. He's like going through 16-year-old stuff. Like, he's very emotional. He feels like the world's like ending, and he's he's kind of crawled into himself, and his mom always talks about how she misses the old him when she gets drunk. But he has a secret Twitter account, and this is his like nesting place. This is where he says all of his inner thoughts and where he talks about everything he thinks. And this Twitter account is almost everything to him. And he gets a follower one day, and no one looks at his tweets. And then his follower starts liking everything. And then all of a sudden, there's thousands of people liking his tweets, and he doesn't really know what to do with that. That part kind of segments off, and we learn that they are going on a family cruise. Then we get to the mother's perspective. She meets this lady. The mom is really struggling with feeling like a human being after having her child, Marcus, who's 7 years old now, but he's not really super featured in the story, but she's struggling feeling like a person in the grips of being a mother, which is a common thing that happens to a lot of people. But she meets this lady at her yoga class, and this lady is named Larissa, and she talks to Larissa a lot. Larissa sends her this email. She opens the link, and now everyone in her email has gotten an email with the same link. She freaks out. She sends all these people emails being like, I'm sorry, like, I didn't mean to. And then they all say it's fine, but she's still stuck on it. She's still freaking out, and she still feels like a bad person for doing this. So she is like kind of losing it, and they lose $4,000, and they start getting packages, and they're like, okay, what the hell? And she starts getting this package of this protein powder, and she's like, what is this? And she puts it away in the pantry because she doesn't want Asher to see it. And then we get to Asher. Asher and her stories kind of intersect, so I'll flip-flop between them. But Asher starts watching Fox News. And this is where it really starts to be a thing. So Asher, one night, just starts putting it on, just starts watching a little bit, and he says to hate watch it. People who don't make him feel stupid. And he watches it more and more, and he just keeps watching it, and he can't stop. It becomes almost an addiction every night, hours on hours, and then it slowly transitions, very slyly, might I add, into him being like, well, they just explain everything to me so I don't have to think, which I think is such a great way to put that, of like, oh, like I don't even want to think, like it's not that important, because it shows the level of research that some people are willing to do, and it really is so true to life, especially living in the world that we live in today. The way that people are so unwilling to do research, and they just want to be told what to think. They don't want to actually have to process information fully. Also plays into the media or the literacy crisis. So basically what happens is he's just watching more and more and more. And parallel to him, his wife, she becomes obsessed with this woman. This woman is Larissa. Larissa has an Instagram account. It's like a mommy blogger Instagram account. She becomes obsessed, scrolling and scrolling. It's like intense. And she is enthralled with Larissa. So incredibly obsessed with her, and I love this. I love the way that she's obsessed with her. She talks about how she's like, oh, she's so perfect, like I want to be like her, like I just love the idea of that, like I'm just so, she loves Larissa. And so basically what happens is she's so obsessed with Larissa, she's scrolling, and she's like, how can I better myself? And she goes to this doctor, and the doctor's like, oh, you're okay. Which is, there's a lot of references in here to the way doctors treat women, which is so interesting, and I think it's portrayed so well here. And so she goes to the doctor, they lie to her or whatever, and she comes home, and she's talking about Larissa, and Larissa's very into the wake up and open your eyes movement, which is essentially the MAGA movement of this book. And she's like, no vaccines, you gotta holistically heal yourself, like all of this stuff. And she starts to believe it. She really starts getting into it. So she starts buying the supplements. She starts scrolling more and more on her page. She starts wanting to be more like her. And it gets to the point where she literally loses track of time. She doesn't even know how many days she spent doing this. And it is like, she's like, there's a point in the book where she's like, how long have I been here? Days or weeks? And I love that. So Asher gets a box in the mail, and he assumes Devon, who is the mother, sent it to him. Like, bought it for him. And he opens it, it's a Lazy Boy. Same one as his dad. He builds it, and he sits it out, and he starts to really like it. And every night he's watching more and more Fox News on this Lazy Boy, slowly morphing into his dad. And one night, she comes and sits next to him, and they're doing it next to each other. Like, he's watching Fox News, and she's scrolling on that lady's Instagram account, just going and going. And there's this whole section in here that I personally loved. It's not really plot relevant, but I think it's so interesting where she talks about, oh, she's not fat, but she's not muscular, which is such a great commentary on the way that women are so expected to be either you can't be too muscular, you don't want to show your veins, that's disgusting, but you also don't want to be fat. And that is such an interesting commentary to throw in here. This book talks about so much, so heavily, so quickly, and I think it is justified in its page number, which I usually do not say. I'm not a big fan of long page numbers. I think we can fit a lot into a very small book. But anyway, so they're scrolling, and she's like, have you booked our flights for the cruise? And he's like, oh, we're not going on the cruise. And she's like, why? He's like, because I can't get away from work. Insane. And there's a section here where it talks about her Devon's like holistic healing food, and Marcus, the 7-year-old, throws it up all over the table, which I love. This is essentially where I left off. They get in a fight, and he wakes up the next day realizing he'd fallen asleep watching the news, which is the first time he's ever done this. I love this. I knew I was going to like this, and I went searching for it at my library. It took me a while to find it, but once I did get it, I knew I was going to like it. And I opened it, and I just knew. This book is great. It is so good. I am currently in love with it, and I will probably report back to you in about 120 pages. I might finish it, honestly. I'm not 100% sure, but I am absolutely devouring this. I've only had this for about a day, and I'm about a third of the way through it. Anyways, I'll see you then. Hello. So I've returned back to you. I'm now 120 pages further into Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Clay McLeod Chapman. And just before I get into the rest of my summary, I just want to put a trigger warning here and say that this book gets really intense. I'll put up the no spoiler section right here because from here, it's going to get real bad. So I'm just warning you now, and I'll warn you again before we get into the really, really intense stuff, but I'm going to get into my summary now. So we left off with the dad after the mom went and she left the living room because she got all angry. So Asher, the dad, he's sitting there and he stares in the TV and he's basically talking to the newscaster at this point, and he essentially does some weird sexual stuff with the newscaster. I don't want to really talk about it, and I don't think you really want to hear about it. It's not important to the overall plot. So then we switch perspectives. We are now with Caleb again. He is having nightmares. He is really struggling with all of his new followers. He's getting a lot of messages. He's getting a lot of people talking to him. He's having a lot of things. He gets a guy texting him being like, you have potential. He's like, what do you mean I have potential? Then from there, he has this weird nightmare of him walking in the forest and him just getting notification after notification after notification. Then he wakes up. He goes downstairs and he walks in and he sees his mom's tablet open. He starts snooping. He starts looking through her photos. He starts making fun of her and saying how she's not acting normal, basically. And then he is just sitting there. He's trying to get water, and everything starts turning on. The blender starts turning on, the TV starts turning on, and then the TV starts playing porn. And it's loud, and the volume turns all the way up, and he's walking out there trying to turn it off. And then his mom walks out, and she's like, you used to be such a happy boy. I don't know what the hell you're doing. And she turns off the TV. So now we switch to Marcus's perspective. Marcus, it's now family night. And Marcus, I think, is very interesting in this book. He doesn't have his own perspective. Everyone else has a name. He doesn't have a name. It's just family night. Like, he has a name, but like in the book, it titles every section by someone's name. His is just family night. So basically what happens is it's family night. He walks past Caleb's room, which at first, he hears this weird pop sound. At first, I really did think he was vaping. That was like my original guess. He's not vaping. We'll get into that later. And he walks downstairs, and their mom is cooking, and she's making some weird food, like some overly healthy stuff. So she's serving up some healthy food. She tells him to go get his brother. He goes up there and he's like bangs on the door, and then he comes out with his like hoodie over his eyes, which is why I thought he was like, I guess he didn't really think he was vaping. I just thought he was like doing drugs or something, but to each their own. And so he comes out, they come downstairs. They're downstairs and they're having dinner, and the dad's muttering about some MAGA stuff. I don't even really remember what he's saying, but it was something weird, and it was something, I believe, about like schools and stuff, like about like content in schools. And then what happens is the food's awful. The food's bad. We know the food's bad. And so Marcus tries to feed it to the dog Rufus. And the mom like grabs his hand like aggressively and starts basically yelling at him, being like, "You have to eat your food. Like, I don't want you to be healthy. You need to wake up and open your eyes. Like, this is not okay." And he just like is like, "Girl, what the hell are you doing?" And she just starts sobbing, like literally just mental breakdown, starts crying, is like crying to him. He's like, "Girl, what the hell?" And she's like, "Okay." And then she literally gets up, stops crying. Now, from here, we switch to Devon's perspective. The mom. She's doing this like weird juice cleanse to like fix her body, and we get to the point where she's just talking to the tablet now. She don't give a shit. People are in the room, she's still talking to it. She's having full conversations with Yoga Mama on the tablet. And she's doing this weird juice cleanse, and she's like kind of having like a breakdown because obviously if you're not consuming good food or like just food in general, your body's gonna start like breaking down. She talks about how she never felt better, how she's seeing like all these dots around her, which is obviously like, girl, you're hungry. That's why you're seeing these dots. But she didn't know that. She didn't care. So she's like just literally having like these weird talks on her tablet, and then we go to this memory of her, and she's in her room and she's having like pains, like stomach pains from like how hungry she is, like bent over, like fetal position, and she looks to her left or her right, sorry, and she sees a mermaid, and it's like she's seeing this mermaid, and it has screens for fins, like screens for scales, and it's like looking at her, and its eyes are that pixelated like gaslight, and she's just like staring at it, and then she wakes up and her phone is like pressed in her face and the glass is like all over her face. And from here she wakes up and it's the day. She gets a call from her son's school, and they're like, "Hey, your son hasn't been to school in like 4 days." And she's like, "Well, what the hell is he doing then?" So she goes up to his room, and she's like, just like walks in there, and she's like staring at him, and she's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And she looks at him, and he's just literally face at the screen, like just staring at it. And she hears a bunch of weird sounds coming out of the speakers, and it smells musty in there. And she's like, "What the hell?" And he's like, "You should have knocked." She's like, "Girl, I did knock." And she literally turns around and leaves. And I think this is such a funny part of the book. She's like, "Well, can't do anything about that." And then she just goes to scrolling on the girl's Instagram, and she's like, "Well, who cares?" And she's literally just like being like, "Yoga Mama will help me fix this. She's got this. She's got this on lock. She'll help me fix all this." From here, she's like, actually, fuck this family. And she decides that she doesn't actually want to be a part of the family. She gets this whole, she's literally talking to her tablet, by the way. And she's like, "I don't need my family. Like, I'm going to be better without them. Like, I've got this." And she just like basically devised that she doesn't want to be a part of the family anymore. And in the book, it talks about her as going down a rabbit hole. Essentially, like, that's like the way that you know that they've been like fully like indoctrinated. And I love that. I love that in the book, it's like she went down, down, down the rabbit hole. And I just love that. That's such a great way to convey it. So after this, we switch perspectives. We switch to Asher's perspective, I believe. And he's getting laid off. His boss is like, "We can't afford to keep you. The company's gotta like, we gotta do something." So he gets laid off, and there's a section in here where it's like so insane. He's like, "Well, I feel bad about that, but I could just bring a sawed-off shotgun and kill everyone." And oh, that did have me gagged, and I do love that use of shock value. I'm not a big fan of shock value. I think authors rely too hard on shock value a lot of the time, and if you don't do it right, it falls flat, and then I'm just thinking you're unskilled. This worked for me. I thought it was great. And so he goes home, no job. And they give him like a severance package, I believe. So he has like I don't know exactly how a severance package works, but I'm pretty sure they pay him for a certain amount of months, like a certain amount of weeks. And so he goes home, and his wife's like, "Why are you home?" And he's like, "Well," he doesn't tell her. He just like is like sitting on the couch, and she's like, "Actually, I don't even care," because she's like done with the family now. And she's literally just staring at this like pixelated screen, just like looking at it. And so she like is like, "Well, I need you to talk to our son." And he's like, "Why?" And he's like, "Because Marcus has been going to school and telling his teachers about what his parents are doing at home." And they don't like that, obviously, because what do you mean you're doing all of this insane stuff while your child is in the house? So he brings he goes and gets Marcus and he brings him in. He's like, hey, you have to stop telling your teachers about this stuff. Which is, if you have to say that sentence in the first place, you really need to think about that. But he forgets, because obviously they're like, I love the section of this book. They start to misspell things. They start to forget things. But he forgets what he's trying to say to his son. And earlier when he was getting laid off, he couldn't even look the guy in the face because he couldn't tell you where his face was. So he's like forgetting what he's saying to son. And he starts giving him like the puberty talk. And his son's like, what the hell? And he's grabbing onto his son. He doesn't even realize it. But his son like starts screaming. Marcus starts screaming. Marcus is that character. Marcus, I feel so bad for him. He goes through so much in this book, and he's such a great character. So he starts screaming. Marcus backs up. He's like, what the hell? And he runs up to his room and locks the door. And the dad starts banging on the door, like ramming into the door, being like, you need to wake up and open your eyes. Like, you're such a little child. Mind you, he is a child. And he just essentially, and then he goes in his monologue. He's like, well, nothing I can do about that. And then he walks back downstairs and goes and sits and like watches more TV. We're with Asher still, and wakes up in the middle of the night and he's staring at the TV. And I kid you not, he literally goes and combines with the TV, which is obviously to show that and then it writes that he's down the rabbit hole. So now he's been fully consumed by this. Now he's gone as well. Now we're switching to Caleb's perspective again. So Caleb has been forced to go to school. His mom forced him to go to school, and he's been chatting with E, who is his online friend. And E tells him a bunch of stuff. E is like, oh, like, you are so special, like, you're so great. And he's like, you need to wake up and open your eyes, though. So they're chatting a bunch on Twitter, and then he makes him move to this weird sketch site. And he just, like, is basically, like, telling him how amazing he is, that no one understands him, like, and he's being like, you're amazing. And then he starts asking him weirder questions. He's like, are you a virgin? And he's like, well, why? And he's like, because you need to be pure to be part of the movement. And then he starts getting him to do this juice cleanse. And when he does this juice cleanse, he literally is like, he's like not eating anything. He basically turns into Devon. He's not eating anything. He's just drinking these weird juices. And what he would do is he'll literally just like, he'll like profess his love for the wake up and open your eyes movement, and then he just sticks this powder in his mouth and just eats it. And he posts that. And then there's another time where he literally just pours like a bunch of olive oil on himself and just is like, and just starts eating more powder and like almost throws up. This is where I'm giving my official, I'll put on the screen now where my spoiler free review is, but this is where I'm putting my trigger warning. It is about to get real bad, and there's about to be a lot that happens. That is my warning. I'm going to start. So we switch perspectives to Marcus. Marcus is really struggling. He is having to literally pee out the window, and his only friend is Rufus. Everyone has literally like lost their minds, and he hasn't eaten in days, and he goes downstairs for dinner because it's family dinner night, and they have food on the table, and he's like, what the hell is that? And because they haven't eaten meat in days. And so he's like, gets really scared, and then he feels something nuzzling his hand. He gets relieved, and then it starts nuzzling between his legs, and it starts really forcing. He looks under the table, there's nothing there. And then he's like, where's Rufus? And they all start laughing at him, because obviously Rufus is the thing on the table. And this is the part where I was like, oh, what the hell? What the hell is this? And so they're laughing at him, they're making fun of him. He runs up to his room and locks the door. And he starts snuggling with his stuffed animal, and I'll get into more of this in my review later, but that is like, this is where the book really starts to like show you it's gonna do some things. I'm like utterly gagged. Now we switch to Devon's perspective. She goes to the store, and she's kind of lost it by this point, as eating the family dog indicates. And she's basically like at the store, and she's staring at the TVs at the store, and everyone's looking at her because she looks bad. She looks awful. And she sees Yoga Mama on the TV, and she's like screaming at her, and she like gets her new name. Like she like comes up with her social media handle, and she's like talking to her, and she's like, yes, like we'll show these people, like they'll understand. And the guy walks over to her, and he's like, are you good? And she's like, yeah, I'm great. And then she walks over to the pharmacy aisle and starts throwing shit off the shelves and recording. She's like, hey guys, this is me, like on her like TikTok or whatever. And they start kicking her out. They're like kicking her out. Everyone's recording. She's still screaming, being like, they're poisoning you. Then from here, we switch to Asher's perspective. He wakes up from a nightmare and he goes up to the TV and he literally walks into the TV. And a lot of that kind of stuff happens in this book. And he literally goes in the TV and he starts speaking as the newscaster. And he's like, it feels so natural, like, blah, blah, blah. And then behind the camera, he sees a demon looking at him and smiling and telling him it's time to smile. Switch back to Caleb. Caleb is enthralled with E. He is deep in it. He is basically worshiping him. He's telling him, he's like, you're gonna be great, like you're gonna change the world for us. And he had a little bit of resentment when he was doing the diet cleanse stuff. Now he's fully in it. And he decides to build a bomb to blow up his school. And that is what happens. He goes and he buys the materials off this weird guy. I don't even remember. He literally goes and buys them from a superstore, I believe. But before he can do that, we switch perspectives again. Now we are with Marcus. And Marcus, again, is the best character, and he goes through so much. Now we switch to him, and it's rough. He walks out of his room because he's literally dying of hunger, and all the light bulbs are smashed because the dad literally stuck his hand in them and just destroyed them barehanded. All the stuff's off the walls. All of the photos are smashed. He goes downstairs into the kitchen. All the drawers are pulled out. The kitchen's open. There's food everywhere. It's rotting. It's disgusting. And what happens is he goes in there. He finds a jar of pickles after scrounging through for a very long time. And he eats them. And since he hasn't been eating, he starts throwing up. And then he starts crying. And then he hears someone singing. And he turns to his right. And his mom is standing on the counter, standing on the counter looking at him. And she doesn't see him right away. And she goes over to him and is like, oh, I'll make you something to eat. She pulls out her blender and starts throwing like rotted stuff in it. And is like blending it all up. And then she takes his hand and starts to try to like put his hand in it. He pulls away and she's like, oh, you don't want me to cook for you? And then she gives him a tablet and it's like, I think you should have a screen of your own to finally understand how to wake up and open your eyes. And he runs upstairs. And then she goes live. And she's like talking because it's the day of the Great Awakening. It's the day that they're going to wake up and open their eyes. And she starts speaking. And she's like, hey guys, welcome back. And she starts mashing her hand into her tablet screen and just takes the chunks out of the glass and starts eating them. And she's talking to everyone. And then she literally takes her hand, puts it in a blender. And that happened. And then we switch perspectives again. Now we're at the dad. He's at the school. And if you know where this is going. And I'm not going to say a lot of it because I have no interest in repeating it. So he goes to the school. He runs past the office. They're like, how's your summer going? Like, blah, blah, blah. He's like, or how's Christmas? And he's like, oh, we're going on a cruise. And like, he's just talking to her. And then he literally runs past the office, goes to the classroom. And yeah, I'm not finna state all that. So that's up to your imagination, or you can read the book. Then we switch to Caleb's perspective. He's in his English class. And what happens is he goes up to the front. No one's looking at him. He starts banging his head into the board. And then he essentially is like talking to everyone. He's like, you will wake up and open your eyes one day. You'll finally understand. Like, you'll understand what the world's about. And then he blows himself up. And I'm happy that this book made the decision to not kill everyone in that there. It's just, he just dies. No one else dies. And it's everywhere. And he becomes an internet meme because everyone starts recording him. That's where the book leaves off. That's where I've read to. This book is utterly horrifying. It is so visceral, so incredibly, it leaves no stops. It's there. And as disgusting as it is, I think it is utterly necessary. I think a book like this needed to be written. I think to show the way that these like right-wing fucking disgusting pieces of shit affect people is so necessary in the society we live in, especially if you live in America. You will understand what I'm talking about. It is everywhere. And it is so real to the way that people are destroyed. I think this book does it so subtly, and it transitions these characters so incredibly slowly that you don't even realize until they're cooking the fucking dog. Like, it is insanely visceral, and I think it is utterly genius. I think this book is genius. I think there is like no other way to state it. I think it is great. I think this book is written in a very, very, very strong tone. And I think if you're not ready for it, I would not read it. It comes fast and it hits you hard. And it is utterly exhausting to read, and in the best way possible. But I read this book and I get tired. It takes everything out of you, but I do think it's great. And I'll report back to you when I've read to the end, and I'll see you then. Okay, hello. I have now officially finished Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Clay McLeod Chapman. And I'm here to give you the end of the summary. So we cut off where the family essentially just loses it. Like, they're gone, there's nothing left. We open again to just stories. So there's a story of these women having drinks, like they're having margaritas during the reawakening. Then they all just start like killing each other. There's stories of cops getting overrun by people. There's stories of there's a grandma at a wedding that just tears off this guy's ear. Like, just so it's very heavily spliced in. And the rest of the story from here is these stories are spliced in. I'm not going to go over all of them because there is a lot. If you want to read all of them, you got to read the book. But there is a lot of these stories, and it's supposed to show the inconsistencies of news. But then we switch back to Noah. And Noah now has kind of lost his shit a little bit because the world is, like, gone. Like, it's over. Like, it's all coming down. So Noah now his mind is being newscasted by the CNN news host. And I thought that was such a funny choice. Like, that is a phenomenally good choice. I absolutely love that. That was absolutely great. So now that his brain is being newscasted, right? We get to him. So he walks out of his parents' house after going through all of this. And he's trying to just discover what's happening. He sees a car crash. A bunch of people are dying. There's people, like, just becoming mounds of each other, like, literally ripping into each other, just becoming, like, just all kinds of things. And he sees a lot of people dying. So he decides the best course of action from where he is to take the car and drive to Devon's house and try to figure something out there. And then we hear other stories. So there's a story of these people breaking into the White House and killing a bunch of people. There's a story about the highways. This is what's important. All of the major highways have been blocked. It's just mounds of people that are blocking these highways, and there's no way out. They're destroying things. They're wrecking, like, everything. If they see you, they're going to rip you out of the car and eat you. It is an entire, like, just like a zombie apocalypse, essentially. But there are back roads. So Noah gets on the back roads and he starts driving. And he literally is just running people over. Like, in the newscaster section, he's like, oh no, Noah hit another one. Like, I thought that was so hilarious. But no, he's literally just running people over. And he makes it, but on the way to the house, he, like, literally, what's it called? Like, the car breaks down and he has to walk all the way to Devon's house. And he gets there. And when he gets there, the door just, like, kind of opens and it's unlocked. And he's like, oh, what the hell? Like, And he walks in and he sees something scurrying across the floor. And when I first read this, I obviously thought that it was Devon. But he goes in, he finds Marcus. He's been living in the closet. He is disheveled. He has not eaten in weeks. He is absolutely, like, horrified. And so he goes and finds Marcus, and he sees him on his tablet. That's all he's got. And when he walks up to, like, talk to him, Marcus looks at him and he goes like this. Absolutely horrifying. And then behind him, he hears crunching. Just like, and then Devon is sitting on the counter, like, looking at him, and Marcus pulls him in to the pantry, and they shut the door. And this was horrifying because she slowly inches closer, and then she swings the door open. Also, on his way in, he gets a pizza cutter, and when Devon swings the door open, he literally, like, tries to cut her up. It doesn't work. She grabs him, she throws him against the ground, and then she jumps on him, but when she jumps on him, he, like, holds it up and it, like, stabs her. And he gets up, and now that he's realized that their whole family is kind of cooked, he just, like, is like, okay, we gotta get out of here. So he takes Marcus and he sets him on the porch, and he just leaves him there. And he goes back inside, and he's like, oh, I need the keys to the car. This part. So he walks in, and he looks to his left and Devon's not there. The way, if I was in this situation, I would piss myself. Oh my god, absolutely horrifying. This book does such a great job of putting you in these situations of the characters. He's behind him. She grabs him and starts licking his ear, trying to bite off his ear, and he like stomps on her foot, and he makes sure that she is gone. She's not getting back up. He takes the keys, and there's a part in this book where he talks about how he can never talk to anyone about what he just did, and then he walks outside, and Marcus is like, oh, what happened? He's like, I don't know. Also, on this section, he's talking to Marcus, and he's like, Marcus is giving off some major trauma vibes. I love that. I thought that was hilarious. So they get in the car. He's really struggling to, like function. Like, he's not really moving. He's just, like, PTSD. Like, he's so incredibly traumatized that he is struggling to do anything. All he's doing is staring at this tablet, watching this video over and over and over again because it's, like, all that comforts him. And when he walks outside, he sees there's a group of kids running at them. When they're running and they hop in the car, the kids are banging on the window. They're, like, screaming just the facts, which is the slogan or whatever of the Fax News or Fox News or whatever the hell. And they back up, they drive, and he turns around to look at the kids, and of course, they get in a car crash. So they get out of the car, they start walking. I will say, the plot hole here, I was not the biggest fan of. It didn't ruin the book for me, like, in any sense of the word, but, like, what do you mean they got out of the car? Wouldn't they get, like, eaten? Like, wouldn't that be, like, what happens? I don't know. I don't know about all that. They just start walking because there's literally nothing else they can really do at this point. They decide they need to go to McDonald's. So he sneaks in McDonald's. He steals them some food. They keep going. They see this old couple. The old couple essentially tells them to keep on walking because they're not going to help them. So there's this lady. She's charging them with a stroller. She's obviously trying to kill them, and she dies, and she gets shot. And then there's other people around them getting shot, and they're really scared. They look up. There's two snipers. One of them is Martha. The other one I'm going to call C because I do not remember his name. And there's a whole group of them. The Martha was the Dick's Sporting Goods manager. She prepared. They're all heading to DC. So they essentially, Marcus and Noah just kind of hop on their train because there's really like nothing else they could do at this point. What happens is they all get to the Lincoln Memorial and they walk to DC. And when they get there, they discover something. They discover a mound of people. So many people that it stretches from the Lincoln Memorial to the Capitol to the Washington Monument. And I thought it was so funny that he's like, oh, they broke into the Capitol. That's hilarious. But they're like absolutely just enamored watching these people because it is just absolutely terrifying what's going on. And one of them notices them and they all start noticing and they literally turn around and start running. C and Martha, they're dead. They got cooked. It's over. They get eaten. But Marcus and Marcus and Noah, they hide in this food truck and there's another family in there and it's a dad and his two kids. And what happens is that Marcus's tablet dies and he starts throwing a tantrum. And the guy kind of kicks him out. He's like, I got to protect my family. Like, I can't help you. I'm sorry. Which is so fair. And they keep walking. They're just back on the road. And I also, again, I don't understand necessarily how they didn't get killed, but to each their own. It's whatever. So from here, they find a rest stop. After they've been walking for a long time, Marcus has to pee, so Noah goes and checks and makes sure that there's no one in there. And he's like, Ghost is clear, you're all good. So Marcus goes and pees. He gets scared of his reflection, so he goes to the stall. And through the glory hole, he sees an eye talking to him after he's been peeing for a minute. He freaks out, but the eye doesn't have feet, and the eye doesn't have other arms. The eye only has one arm, and it's an eye. And it gives him a tablet and tells him that his parents want him to have it. Fucking terrifying. Oh my god. Absolutely horrifying. So great. And he walks out and we skip a bunch of time. So now we end up at this like tunnel thing. It's essentially the tunnel between Maryland and I don't know where it was. It says in the book, I don't remember. But it's a tunnel from Maryland to somewhere else. And it's a car tunnel. But since all the power's down, there's no lights. So you gotta go in there and you gotta pray. And so they start walking in, and Marcus hasn't been saying anything. He's been acting really weird. So they're walking, and all of a sudden Marcus starts singing, and he's singing louder and louder. And he's like, dude, what the hell are you saying? And then everyone starts singing, and he realizes that these people have been hiding in here, and he starts running, and then someone slams the car door and it hits him like square in the face, and he lands on the ground, and then they get up and they run out of the tunnel. He straps Marcus to his back with a buckle, or with his belt, so that Marcus is on his back so he can't kick or scream or anything, but he's still singing the whole way. He's going to a pig farm to exorcise Marcus to get him back from this like demon possessed like state. So he goes to the pig farm, and they're all standing in the middle of pigs, and he's trying to unpossess Marcus, and then he kind of realizes that, wait, this was never going to work. This is not going to work, and he just, like, essentially gives up. Like, him and Marcus are sitting there, and Marcus is giggling, like, rolling around in literal pig shit, and he gives up. He just gets consumed, and the pigs are singing the song, and he's singing the song, and then we switch to it's a prologue, but it's not a prologue, of him going home, and Alicia lets him in, and he and Marcus walk in, and they all give him a hug, and then you hear him start singing, and we obviously know that their family gets cooked too. I loved this. I thought this was absolutely phenomenal. However, I will be back in like a day or two to give my full review, because I want to let this simmer a little bit more. I want to gather my thoughts a little bit more in this. This covers so much. It is so incredibly dense. So I will be back once I have done that. Hello. So I have returned to you to give you my review of Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Clay McLeod Chapman. I loved this book. I'm going to get into my criticisms, and then I'm going to get into the overall content of this book and the meanings and stuff, and then I'll get into my just end review and what I loved. So I'm going to start with my criticism. There's not much. I really did like this book a lot. I thought it was actually very phenomenally written. I thought it was phenomenally just put together in general. But there's a few things. In the beginning of this book, there is this massive info dump. It's about 4 or 5 pages. I did not like that. It sets up something later, though, that allows other characters to not have to have that info dump, and I understand to an extent of exposition. I'm more of a fan, though, personally, when a book will just throw you in and let you kind of figure it out yourself. And then there's a child's perspective in here, Marcus's perspective. I think it tightens up over a period of time, and I think it gets better. But I think at the same time, certain points of this book, it's not my favorite. I think there are times where they treat him as a little bit more childish than a 7-year-old actually is. I think sometimes he's treated as stupid, but I think as the book goes along, it tightens up its child perspective more and more. That is my criticism. That is all of my criticism for this book. And now I'm going to get into the overall concepts of this book. So I'm going to start with like the feminist ideologies in here. So something I loved that this book addresses is the idea that women cannot, you don't want to be muscular, but you don't want to be fat. And I think that is such an interesting concept in the way that it is so heavily pushed by so many people, even if they don't realize it. And this book talks about it so much. Like the characters in here, especially Devon, like the way that she addresses it, and she thinks that she's not necessarily like pushing forward something, but it lives inside of her. It's actively inside of her. It's actively building towards like her hate for fat people, for super muscular women. And I think that is so incredibly interesting in the way that it's portrayed. And another one in here is the way that Devon thinks about other women. She is so incredibly enthralled with Yoga Mama or whatever that she does not want to have. Also, none of these are spoilers, by the way. None of this is like super duper plot relevant. This is all side stuff that's not really super central to what's actually going on. But she is so enthralled that she hates on other women consistently in here. She talks about how they're not good enough, they're not healthy enough, they're not this, they're not that. And I think that's such an interesting concept. And then on top of that, the way that men play into that. This book does a phenomenal job of talking about how men play into women's issues. For example, her husband is constantly telling her, oh, you look good, or oh, you look ugly. Like all of these things, either playing into her insecurities or telling her that she should not be insecure about things that she is. And not in a healthy way. He is telling her she shouldn't be insecure about these things in a way that is almost insulting. Like he's talking to her, he's being like, well, you know, you could be better. And I find that so interesting. And then also the way that she never plays into that. She never comes for him. In this entire book, she only brings up her issues with him about one time, and then the rest of it, she's never coming for him. I would say men feel so incredibly empowered to talk about women in every aspect. They feel like essentially it's this weird patriarchal societal norm that men feel like women owe them something. They feel like women owe them something, and this book talks about it a lot, especially in the ways that Asher feels like Devon owes him to cook him dinner, to take the kids to school, to do all these things, with part of like, a 50-50 partnership, but their partnership is not 50-50. And I think that is explored so interestingly here, because she doesn't make dinner, but he could step up and make dinner, but he refuses. He thinks it's essentially a woman's domain to do that. And that is like such a exploration of so many men in which they're not willing to stand up for their families for anything if it causes them more harm than what they are willing to go through. I absolutely love this book. I think that is explored so well here. I think this book is so incredibly dense in the way that it explores topics, and I think it doesn't it's only 300 pages, or it's like 382. In that, it explores all of these topics so well. So now we're going to get into more sections of this. In addition to this, there is an entire section of Devon telling the doctors that there is something wrong with her. She is trying to get help for what's happening to her, essentially, but the doctors dismiss her. And it's not just one doctor, it's multiple. And that is, again, such a great display of how real life is. Women constantly are told by doctors that they're not, like, they don't know what they're talking about. And also in this book, it uses fiction also to display that in the book. I'm not going to tell you what it uses because that would be a spoiler for the book, but just know it does. It uses other ways to show in the ways that men, or specifically men in power, don't believe women when they're telling them something, especially about their own bodies or about themselves. I think it is so interesting, the connection between Devon and Yoga Mama, the way that she sees her as almost a god because she wants to be so much like her. And I wouldn't say this is necessarily like a feminist issue. I would say this is more of a human issue in general, in the ways that we idolize other people, either not knowing them, knowing them in any way. The way that we idolize them, their lives, without knowing the full extent of who they are or what they're going through or what they're doing to make these things. I think Devon has such an amazing exploration of a parasocial relationship inside of this novel. She is consistently just following her every move, and it breaks down really fast, and you see it break down. Again, I would tell you, but I don't want to spoil what happens in this book. But if you think all of this sounds interesting, go read this. It is absolutely phenomenally good. Anyways, so now we're going to talk about more of the issues that this discusses when it comes to the ideas of race. The way that it dives in is that it acknowledges that being someone who's white, you can never truly understand someone's experience who is not. You will never understand what it feels like, especially in America, to be born into a society that already hates you. That is just not an experience you can understand until you've lived it. And this book is uncomfortable. It will make you uncomfortable, but you should feel uncomfortable because the things inside this book are so incredibly real and true to life. And this is explored mostly in the relationship between the dad and his kids, and how he is white, but his kids are not. In the way that his mother talks to these kids, and again, this is not a spoiler either. This is all explored on the first page. The way that his mother talks to these kids, and he just sits there. He doesn't even try to fight back because he doesn't understand. And that is not an excuse. And this book I love that the book says that it's not an excuse. Not knowing is not an excuse for not fighting back. And this book talks about that in more ways than one, but specifically when it comes to this discussion, he just sits there. He doesn't say anything, and it is horrendous the way. And his wife considers leaving him over this, and he doesn't even really understand. And then another exploration of race in this book is that the other dad, Asher, he has this weird slight racism. And this book, I just love this book. I love the way that it talks about its characters. It understands the issues that it's trying to talk about. He has this slight racism that he considers not that bad. But this book clearly shows that slight racism, or I'm not that racist, is as bad as being directly racist. You are contributing to narratives that further racism in the way that it builds. You can't not this book talks about it so many times. You can't say the N-word and not be racist. You can't make racist jokes and not be racist. These things build towards a higher objective of racism because someone else hears them. Someone else is thinking about them. And you make this okay. If you make this okay, it builds into the world. And it is also explained in terms of children. His children develop these like racist ideologies because he says them, but he says they're not that bad. And that is precisely the problem. And that is precisely what this book addresses. The way that it explores it is so incredibly in-depth. Now we're going to get into the biggest discussion of racism in this book, and it is literally the entire book. So, in this book, what happens... Well, I can't say that. In this book, there is a wide discussion of racism. So, it is talked about... If you've read this, or if you watch the summary, you'll know what I'm saying, or if you read it, you'll know what I'm saying. But it is talked about as a white issue because of the levels in which white people only care when it starts to affect them. And that is great. That is such a great thing, especially for the subject matter of this novel to put in there. It shows so heavily through its characters, especially the main character, that he doesn't care about other people, specifically people of color, and queer people and other people, but mostly people of color, until it affects him. And that is such an interesting exploration. He only cares about the damages to these communities, the pain that is caused. And there's a point in this book where a person of color is talking to him and they're being like, this is centuries old, this is not new. And he doesn't even take a moment to try to understand or empathize with them because he doesn't care, because it doesn't directly affect him. That is great. It is such an in-depth exploration of racism, especially over generations, and how even if you don't think it, it's still built into you. He's not going to directly tell you, and I love that. I think, especially when it comes to subjects like these, you need to be thinking about these books, because if you're not thinking about them, you're not truly gaining what you could be gaining out of them. Now we're going to get into the ideas that are explored when it comes to queer people inside this novel. So it explores it very slightly. It is not as in-depth as the other sections of this book, but it does touch on them every once in a while. But she shows a lot of homophobia, a lot of transphobia. In this book, displays it very interestingly. It shows that even if you don't think that you're necessarily homophobic, you can still be. It is this exploration of the way that even in seeing people as weird or unorthodox can be underlying homophobia and transphobia, because you're looking at them and you're thinking, oh, like, you're weird, like, you're strange, but why is that? Why do you feel that way? And this book forces you to confront things like that. It wants you to understand the ways in which you view other people in the world, and in relation to that, how you view queer people. There is a section in this book, which is also not a spoiler because it's literally the first page, where his mom loses a job to a queer person, and she literally, she's pissed. And also, on top of that, it shows the lack of education surrounding queer people in general. People don't understand what queer people are. They don't take the time to care or try to conceptualize who queer people are as people. So in that, they lose education, and it's still on them. You should be educating yourself. In that, because they lack this education, and because they have this ignorance, they don't understand queer people. And because they don't understand, they see them as degenerates or pedophiles, which is a common thing in this book that they bring up consistently. The view of queer people as pedophiles, which is so not true, and it's such a perpetuated lie by the Bible, and that's where it comes from. And I absolutely love that. The amount of homophobia that I've personally seen, and I've known people who've seen this stuff, it is so incredibly ingrained into society in so many ways, just as the sexism, just as the racism is. This book is so good at telling you and showing the ways in which these hates are so ingrained into our society. They're so built in. They're in the walls of the society. And that is great. That is such a great exploration because people need to think about it more. There needs to be more of a thought of these things. Why do we say certain words? Why do we do certain things? Why do you feel the way you feel? Especially in the time we are in, this needed to be written. Now I'm going to get into the political aspects of this. And the political aspects of this are obviously intertwined with everything I've talked about, but I wanted to separate them just so I can touch on every issue individually and really like try to get everything under the umbrella. So, first of all, we got to talk about Facts News. Absolutely love. Absolutely love. Such a great way to reframe something, especially when it comes to a news source like Fox News. Disgusting. I think it is great in the way that it talks about news is chanting or almost cult-like, because news sources become so incredibly cult following. You follow a certain news source and that is almost seen as your identity. And that is such like the concept in itself feels so incredibly dystopian, but it is so real and true to life. Also, there is a huge discussion about liberal communities in this novel, about the ways in which liberal communities operate, right? How those communities have to function in order to stay within a certain range. It consistently talks about how even in your liberal communities, you're not safe. If you've watched the summary, the final part of this book explores that in such a phenomenally interesting and in-depth way. I can't tell you because it is a spoiler, but it is great. And I think this book is so great at exploring the ways in which liberal communities aren't ever truly safe. You will never truly be safe until every part of a community is helped and is fully heard. Into some more. So, furthermore, I think the way in which this novel discusses school shootings is very good. Because when everything kind of blows up, there is a lot of school shootings, and it's one after another. But that is such a great thing because that's how it feels, especially if you live in America. It is so one after another. It feels like it's almost never ending. And in the novel, when you're reading, you're like, oh, that would never happen, or like consistently through this whole thing. But then you really sit and think about it, and you realize, wait, no, that is happening. That's happening every day. It's every day, all day. I also love how this book, so in here, waking up and opening your eyes is like essentially you kind of going crazy, which is also not a spoiler. It's literally in the first page. That is great. I love that, especially when it comes to super like MAGA like doctrine. They are always talking about how you need to wake up, and I think that is so interesting in the ways that this book explores that. I can't tell you much more than that. You just have to either know what I'm talking about or have read the book, but it is phenomenally good in the way that it shows that waking up is not always what you want to do. Waking up is a tactic most likely to get you to join something or essentially close your eyes. This is definitely the part I'm most excited to talk about in this review. The idea you can be for rights, but when it comes to money, you are conservative. I love the way that it's bringing this up because it talks about how that's not really a real thing, because it's not. You can't be for rights and give those up for money, because in doing that, you're exactly playing into a capitalist narrative. And this book explores that so incredibly well. It shows through one of its characters specifically, if you've watched the summary, read the book, you know what I'm talking about, that you won't. If that's how you view the world, you will fall to the other side's grasp. If you care about your money more, you'll vote for one side. If you care about lives more, you'll vote for the other. And this book explores that so well. Actually, in the current climate we're in right now, that is how it is. You will fall to one side or the other, and typically that happens, and whichever side you're more willing to fall to is where you will end up, which is why this idea of, oh, well, I support civil rights, but for money-wise, I support the other side, is not real. It's not a thing. If that's how you feel, you will end up on the other side that you are ending up voting for in the end. Okay, another thing I'm so excited to talk about when it comes to this book, the idea that even in consuming something for hate, you are still consuming it. It is still in you. You are still contributing to this. I absolutely love that. I absolutely love that. Especially in the world we live in today with like rage bait and all of that. That is such an interesting concept. In consuming things, you are still part of the problem. You are still giving eyes to things that don't need eyes to them. And this is most shown inside of people watching media that they don't necessarily like, but they hate watch. Hate watching is just as bad as actually watching it. Because, especially this book does a great job of showing a character falling to the side of their hate watch. Because in hate watching something, you are contributing. You are a part of it. That is how it is. I also love that the main character in this likes to feel smart, which I think is so interesting, that he wants to feel smart next to other people, but he ends up becoming just like them. It goes from him wanting to be smart to him being handheld because he loses his overall literacy. I think that is such an interesting thing. In wanting to feel smart, you start to lose your literacy because if you're watching lower tier content or whatever, those things are going to handhold you. So you start feeling like you don't even need to think for yourself. Okay, I also love in this book the way that the rich are affected. I think that's so interesting. I think usually I would be kind of like, well, they wouldn't be really affected. But I think when it comes to this specific subject matter, it is a great choice. At first, it angered me a little bit, but once I kind of like sat there and kind of processed it, I think I do like it. I think it's very interesting that in these people, specifically billionaires, pushing these narratives, pushing things forward like this, they will be consumed too. They are so sitting on their high horses thinking, oh, well, I'll be fine. But if something like this did happen, you wouldn't be. You are the first to go. Because you are the one who built these systems, they will crumble on top of you. And I absolutely love that. I absolutely love the way that this book explores that. I love the way that it's not a major focus either. It's kind of slid in there a little bit. It's not a main heavy hitting point. It's just like put in there. I also love in this book, there are these sections. It constantly talks, there are sections of news reportings in between. And because of these sections, you don't know what's happening and you don't know what to believe. And since you don't know what to believe, it is so accurate to what this book wants you to feel. It wants you to feel the way that media is today. And it's not necessarily that you believe everything that it's showing you, but because there is so much of it and so many differentiating opinions, it's hard to understand. And because of these differentiating opinions, you could slip into a side that you don't necessarily believe in. And that is such a great concept, especially when it comes to people who fall into the MAGA movement or whatever, because of the way that media is portrayed. People are so fast to call something fake news, and then they fall into these physically conservative movements or super extreme conservatives, and that is because they invalidate every piece of media that they come across. And I love the way this book explores that. It doesn't even explore it through characters either. It is directly talking to the viewer. And okay, now we're going to get into the main meat of this book, and that is that you only care about things as long as it benefits you. That is the main theme of this book, and I love it. I absolutely love it. It is kind of umbrella termed with that, but there's a lot more under that. It really heavily talks about the idea that a lot of people are kind of liberal or follow certain values only because they think that's what they should do, not because that's what they actually believe, and not because they understand why or what is going on in the world. And it talks about how this just as bad as being a hate group. I love that. I think that's so interesting. Being uneducated in this book is the worst thing you could be, and in real life, but that's like what the book's trying to say, is being uneducated is the worst thing you can be. It is like, you can have beliefs and you can have what are seen as the right beliefs, you know what I mean? But if you don't understand why you carry these beliefs and you don't understand the science, the facts, the reasoning behind them, you are just as bad as hate groups. And I think that is such a great theme for this book to have. I was very happy that that's how this book ended, and that's what the theme that it carried with it was. I think it builds on that theme so well through so many different facets, like I've been talking about, all these different subsections. And I absolutely love it. I absolutely love this. I think it was phenomenal. So now I'm going to get into all my compliments that I have for this book, and there is a lot. Okay, so first of all, this book is absolutely horrifying. Absolutely terrifying. When I was reading this, I was like having to close my window and stuff. Absolutely terrifying. And that is great, especially because it is such a horror novel. I love that. I love a book that can scare me unapologetically. Like, it's just so great. Like, I'm trying to think of other books that did this to me. The Need, absolutely. The first part of The Need, absolutely terrifying. This Thing Between Us, absolutely terrifying. I love this idea that this book has for the terror of it all, especially with all of the things that I've been discussing. The way that it mixes the real terror of what it actually is into this is great. It's so incredibly talented and such a great story building tool. Okay, also, I think this book, this is like less theme, but more just actual contents. This book does the Evil Dead Rise. And if you've seen Evil Dead Rise, you'll know what I'm talking about. The section with the parents is Evil Dead Rise. Like, it is so Clay McLeod Chapman has got the Evil Dead Rise formula down. Like, he made that same terror in this book so incredibly well. And I thought, when I was reading this, I was like, this is exactly like Evil Dead Rise in such a great way. Like, absolutely phenomenal. The call that happens in this book is terrifying. The first call in this book, absolutely horrifying, and has such a great value to this book in the overall concept of the horror. Another thing that builds the horror is just the idea of just death. This book explores death so incredibly well, especially when it comes to people's bodies and things that come out of the bodies, like stuff like that. So great. So great. So great. I didn't really talk about it that much in my summary, but it's there. It's so incredibly prevalent. So for the second section of this book, we go through the stages of possession. This part of the book, we get all the different stages of possession, and then the chapter titles are all the stages of possession. Absolutely great. Absolutely phenomenal. It explores all of them in the way that I thought they should have been explored. I was never felt like I was missing a section. I always felt like I fully was comprehending everything. Great. Talented writing. Insanely talented writing. Conveys things without having to fully be in my face about it. And oh, I love that. Also, another part of this book, the second section, we're just dropped into the world. And I know one of my criticisms was the info drops, and I know that the first info drop allowed this, but I also think this book is great, so, but we're just dropped in the world. They're just talking, and we get dropped in. I love that. I think that is great. I love when a book doesn't sit down and have to spoon feed you everything, but it just drops you in and expects you to understand. This book also trusts its readers. I love a book that trusts me with what it's trying to convey to me. I hate a book that handholds me. This book in here, this is another kind of slight criticism. I don't understand why we didn't do this on the first section, but this is just me. This book uses little memories in between chapters to tell you things about the characters, but it only really does that in the middle part of it, which, to be fair, the middle chunk of this book is literally like this. This is like the middle chunk, so it's so incredibly like most of the book that it kind of cancels out the rest. But I love that. I love a memory splice. I love that you're not having the characters have this conversation where they're like bringing up information that makes no sense. I absolutely love that. I thought that was great. I also think this book uses shock value so well. When he brought up the sawed-off shotgun, if you read this or you've watched my summary, you'll know what I'm talking about. The sawed-off shotgun part, phenomenal. Phenomenal use of shock value. Absolutely 10 out of 10 use of shock value. I love it so much. I thought it was great. This is probably my most raving part of this review. This book does mental breakdown so well. Absolutely great at a mental breakdown. It is so great at a mental breakdown that you don't even realize it's happening until it already happened. You blink and it's already there. It is great. I love a book that can do that. A book that can get a mental breakdown to happen without me fully processing that that's what's going on, absolutely great. Absolutely phenomenal. No notes. Now, I thought this book was 5 stars. I thought this was phenomenal. It is phenomenally written. It is phenomenally themed. It is phenomenally everything. It is great. This is a horrific book, but it is absolutely necessary to the time we were living in. This came out in, I believe, the beginning of 2025. Great. Absolutely, I love it so much. And that's it for me.